After the success of Bohemian Rhapsody, producer Graham King found himself approached by many people wanting their life stories made into films. But he and his team spent time weighing what to do next, debating whether to attempt something entirely different or remain in the biopic genre. The idea arrived suddenly, like a lightning bolt, when a collaborator turned to him and declared that all he wanted was the right to make a Michael Jackson movie. King recognized this as an ambitious goal, but one he could see clearly since Michael Jackson had always performed for the entire world. King believed that if the film could offer audiences an unprecedented humanizing view of Michael, the project would have succeeded. The filmmakers understood they needed to strip away the superstar image to uncover the personal history that shaped his extraordinary talent, carefully selecting which moments of his life to dramatize, aware that biopics are frequently criticized for omissions. They had to map out a clear cinematic through-line. Archival footage of Michael Jackson announcing what he called his final tour appeared alongside reflections that his life, though a fascinating and challenging story to tell, was ultimately the story of a great American artist who rose from a poor childhood in Gary, Indiana, to global stardom. One of the production's greatest anxieties was the fear of never finding an actor capable of embodying Michael Jackson convincingly enough for audiences to believe in him, since nothing else about the film would matter without that. King recalled reassuring Hollywood contacts that a Michael would be found, despite his own private uncertainty. The breakthrough came when he spoke with Jermaine Jackson, whom he had known for decades, and asked to meet Jermaine's son, Jaafar. Jaafar Jackson recounted that his father had been contacted on his behalf, and although he knew King held the rights to the Michael Jackson story, with no director or studio yet attached, he wondered why King wanted to meet him. At their lunch, King asked within minutes whether Jaafar was auditioning to play his uncle. Jaafar, who insisted he had simply been himself throughout the meeting, was stunned by the suggestion, and King described the encounter as shaking his entire sense of certainty, convincing him he had found the person to play Michael Jackson. He later called his partner Lydia to tell her they had found their lead, though he offered no explanation over the phone. Even after that certainty, King admitted privately thinking the decision seemed nearly reckless, given that Jaafar had never acted or danced professionally and did not appear drawn to the entertainment industry until meeting him made the choice make sense. King explained receiving a call from Jaafar declaring his readiness to take on the challenge, understanding it would be an uphill fight, and committing himself to what King called a rigorous acting boot camp. Colleagues remarked they had never seen anyone work as hard as Jaafar did during that period. An acting coach who normally works with newcomers described being contacted by King about a young performer being considered for the Michael Jackson role, with instruction not to let him fail. Training began with the fundamentals of acting before any focus on portraying Michael. Jaafar and his mentor discussed his relationship to his uncle, and Jaafar was told he first needed to distance himself from simply playing a family member and instead learn to fully act, symbolically needing to set aside his familial identity before he could return to embody his uncle's humanity, since Michael, despite his iconic status, was fundamentally a human being. Jaafar described committing fully to the role, framing it as his own path and destiny. When his coach asked why he wanted this part, Jaafar answered that his goal was to clear his uncle's reputation by revealing his humanity. Feeling he was moving in the right direction, Jaafar decided to intensify his preparation further by turning the family estate, Havenhurst, into a personal training ground and creating a research room filled with details about Michael's likes, dislikes, and preferences, so he could immerse himself in the environment where Michael had lived and where he himself had grown up. Jaafar built a timeline spanning from 1962 through 1996, the year of his own birth, which he referred to constantly for context on the era depicted in any given scene. As his preparation intensified, he kept asking his mentors whether they believed it would work, receiving only cautious uncertainty in return, since taking on the role was widely seen as a long shot. Meanwhile, the production launched a worldwide search, auditioning roughly 180 to 200 performers, mostly professional Michael Jackson impersonators, none of whom came close to Jaafar's level once he was in the mix, because he did not merely imitate Michael, but fully embodied him. Jaafar converted a former dining room at Havenhurst into a mirrored dance studio and practiced for hours each day until his feet bled and bruised, resting briefly before resuming. King pressed his team to determine honestly whether Jaafar had the rhythm and stamina to sustain 7 to 10 musical numbers across constant performances, instructing choreographer Richard to bring him into a rehearsal room and report back. The team used the song Billie Jean as a benchmark to test his rhythm, timing, posture, and whether he could replicate Michael's stage presence. Initial results were discouraging. After the first week, the choreography team was unconvinced Jaafar possessed the necessary rhythm, movement control, or body command that Michael had displayed, leaving King heartbroken but unwilling to give up. When informed of the doubts, Jaafar asked to be given 3 more weeks, and by the 3rd week, his mentors recognized his exceptional work ethic, which they considered more decisive than raw talent for overcoming such a demanding role. Afterward, Jaafar invited King to Havenhurst and delivered an unexpectedly impressive 20-minute performance as Michael, convincing everyone the young actor truly had the ability, solidifying his casting and drawing praise for 2 years of dedicated preparation that echoed Michael's own work ethic. At one stage, the team decided Jaafar should attend an anonymous acting class, at King's suggestion, surrounded by peers unaware of his identity or the audition taking place for the Michael Jackson film. Partway through the course, a classmate leaned over and encouraged him to audition for the role, unaware he already had it, and Jaafar simply smiled and said he would consider it. Shortly afterward, it became official that Jaafar had secured the part, following King's earlier decision, made roughly 2.5 years prior, to reach out to Jermaine Jackson to request to meet his son. King later surprised Jaafar by announcing his casting in front of his acting classmates, who had not known why he was really there, creating a moment Jaafar described as amazing to share with them. He also called it bittersweet, since it eliminated any remaining doubt that the project was truly happening, and he recalled the day the team brought him to that acting class as especially meaningful. Observers noted that once Jaafar was confirmed, the production truly began to feel magical, with several colleagues asserting that without him, there would have been no movie, no director, and no studio backing, since he was the essential element who brought the entire project to life. Director Antoine Fuqua reflected that he had never expected to make a Michael Jackson film, yet Michael had been part of his life since childhood, from the Jackson 5 to seeing him on Soul Train as a relatable figure who looked like him. King explained that because producers live or die by their choices, he deliberately avoided rushing the directorial decision, meeting with candidates multiple times, aware that everyone carries a personal viewpoint on Michael Jackson. Fuqua noted that as Michael's career evolved into breaking racial barriers on MTV, Fuqua himself moved into directing music videos, mirroring some of that same pioneering spirit as a filmmaker, and King felt Fuqua's musical background, combined with his dramatic storytelling instincts, made him the right fit. Fuqua compared Michael to a diamond whose many facets reveal something different depending on the light, explaining that the production explored every dimension of his life without avoiding difficult subjects. Through the natural process of collaborating with King, Lydia Silverman, and eventually the cast, the filmmakers gradually discovered the shape of the movie, a process Fuqua described as sometimes grueling but also liberating and exciting, requiring them to return to Michael's formative years to understand what created him. Archival material captured young Michael expressing that he felt he wasn't treated like other children, since people only wanted to stare at him and photograph him. The filmmakers considered casting young Michael one of their biggest challenges, since the audience's emotional investment in the character depended entirely on that opening portrayal. When Giuliano arrived, colleagues described him as radiating confidence and a natural sense of ownership over the role. Giuliano himself expressed deep admiration for Michael Jackson and called landing the role of young Michael a dream come true. King recalled being astonished by Giuliano's audition tape and how thoroughly he had researched the part, including accurately capturing Michael's Indiana accent. Giuliano explained studying archival interviews, including Michael's childhood appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, to master his manner of speech, along with watching music videos like ABC to learn his dancing, all reinforced by extensive practice. Colleagues praised how difficult it is to portray young Michael convincingly without slipping into cuteness, noting that Giuliano approached it as serious acting. Fuqua described Giuliano as a force of nature who, unknowingly, had already been performing as the older Michael Jackson on weekends before being cast. When the production discovered Giuliano had been posting videos moonwalking around Los Angeles in an older Michael persona, it created a concern King addressed directly, telling him he loved the talent but needed him to stop until filming was complete in order to protect the character's introduction to audiences. Giuliano recalled practicing extensively at his choreographer's urging once cast, working relentlessly to improve. Colleagues described him as having an old soul paired with an electrifying, infectious energy, along with Michael's distinctive quality of conveying emotion through his eyes alone, a rare trait for such a young performer that his collaborators recognized immediately, bringing them relief once he was found. A brief archival Family Feud clip referencing the Jackson and Motown families preceded observations that Giuliano, despite his youth, could shift convincingly between joyful musical energy and heavy dramatic scenes alongside Coleman Domingo, who plays Joseph Jackson. The filmmakers were drawn early on to the idea of humanizing the Jackson family, recognizing that Joseph Jackson has often been reduced to a single harsh stereotype, despite being a far more complex figure, a nuance that attracted Domingo to the part. Archival dramatization depicted Joseph warning that no one outside their household would understand his children, framing his strict rearing as an attempt to shield them from people who might exploit them. Fuqua explained wanting to counter the largely negative public perception of Joseph by searching for the love and tenderness beneath his stern, disciplined parenting style. Domingo, drawing on his own relationship with his grandfather, recognized a softer side within Joseph that he hoped audiences would see through his performance, aided by moments when restraint served the character better than overt harshness. Fuqua considered Catherine Jackson the most valuable character to write, since the tension between Joseph and Michael drives much of the story's conflict, while Catherine represents the family's emotional safe harbor, someone Michael could be vulnerable with and rely upon unconditionally. Nia Long, who portrays Catherine, described researching extensively despite the scarcity of personal interviews with her, and noted that in nearly every family interview she reviewed, everyone deferred to Catherine for approval since she functioned as the family's grounding presence. Colleagues described being moved watching Nia Long channel the spirit of the real Catherine Jackson, comparing her performance to their own memories of the family matriarch. Fuqua recalled pairing Long with Domingo specifically because the contrast between her gentler nature and his more forceful presence created compelling on-screen chemistry, and the two actors described a playful rapport off-camera, often breaking character to joke, which they attributed to Domingo's sense of humor. Colleagues praised Long's fierce, graceful screen presence, with Domingo joking that she had joined the ranks of memorable actresses who had played his on-screen wives. Introduced within the story as the family's new head of security, Bill Bray became a recurring presence around Michael. One collaborator described the way certain roles expand organically during filming as something like divine order, noting that although Bray's part was not originally envisioned as large, he was always intended to remain a constant protective figure. Others emphasized that Bray effectively became Michael's surrogate father, a bond evidenced by personal letters Michael wrote about him that have since become public. The actor portraying Bray was praised for bringing a gentle warmth alongside a commanding screen presence, often conveying meaning through silent, expressive glances in scenes with little dialogue. He described the challenge of playing a largely non-verbal character as requiring the same depth of inner life he would bring to any dramatic role, considering everything from mundane daily details to his personal feelings about Michael's music, treating the exercise as both a professional challenge and a deeply human one. Fuqua recalled recognizing the actor's talent early and deciding to position Bray as a witness figure whose perspective allows audiences to observe Michael's journey from the outside. The actor described the teasing, easy rapport between his character and Michael as feeling natural and organic, closely mirroring what he imagined the real relationship between Bray and Michael must have been like, and noted that his role expanded gradually as filming progressed. Too young to have witnessed the era firsthand, he relied on research and secondhand accounts to understand how vital that relationship truly was to Michael, and watching Jaafar's performance helped him internalize that bond further. Choreographers Rich and Tone, who had been Michael Jackson's actual background dancers, were brought in early to train whoever would play the lead role, since the filmmakers considered proper choreography instruction essential. Colleagues expressed excitement at meeting the two men, eager to learn directly from performers who had shared history with Michael. Rich and Tone stressed the importance of trusting their guidance and their first-hand knowledge of Michael's movement style, down to small details like posture, hand positioning, and the precise character of his hip movements. Preparing an actor to portray Michael Jackson required both a physical transformation and mastery of his technique, so Jaafar spent time at Havenhurst studying and channeling his uncle through music and dance, reinforcing the same rigorous work ethic Michael himself had, sometimes spending 6 hours perfecting a single move without feeling satisfied. Roughly 2 to 3 months before filming began, Jaafar trained under a ballet specialist to understand weight transfer, turns, and overall body mechanics, since Michael's career spanned nearly every dance style. Jaafar initially struggled with Michael's signature spin technique, which relied on an innate ability to recenter his body mid-turn to sustain momentum rather than drifting off balance like most dancers, requiring extensive additional coaching to master. A street dance and popping specialist was also brought in, connected through the Electric Boogaloos, the group credited with originating popping, while another trainer known as Sugar Pop worked alongside the ballet instructor to build both technical foundation and stylistic authenticity appropriate to each era being depicted. Trainers recalled that the earliest sessions in the studio evoked the feeling of watching Michael's presence reborn, describing how Jaafar's interpretation of movement reminded them instantly of his uncle. The process involved daily multi-hour sessions with both the ballet and popping instructors to build his body and vocabulary of movement ahead of principal photography. The first 2 weeks of shooting proved intense and physically demanding, since production deliberately began with concert sequences, reasoning that the combination of choreography, singing, and acting required peak physical conditioning early on. Starting with the concerts allowed Jaafar to avoid burnout later and ensured he remained in top condition for the demanding stage sequences, with mentors noting they wanted the difficult physical work banked before moving into other scenes, easing him into camera work and building confidence for both performance and drama. Choreographers described tailoring each concert to reflect a distinct sense of scale and audience energy appropriate to that stage of Michael's career, while explaining, for instance, that filming the Bad Era concert sequence occurred just after Michael's narrative separation from his family and the announcement ending his touring, marking a deliberate shift into a new persona reflected in his leather and strap costuming. Studying the original Bad tour jacket made the transformation feel real to those involved, and the production emphasized how Michael's costumes evolved meaningfully over time, reflecting the character he wanted to present at each stage of his career. Jaafar wore an exact replica of the jacket from that tour, describing the tactile sensation of its buckles and zippers as reassuring, trusting the costume department entirely to ensure accuracy. Filming captured both the vast scale of a stadium audience of roughly 100,000 people and intimate close-up perspectives of Michael's breathing and performance, with crews noting that the sequence representing Billie Jean, a personal favorite for Jaafar, required an especially demanding full day of filming from every camera angle despite the emotional pressure of getting it right, given how much the song had meant to him growing up. Jaafar described needing a full-body commitment to the performance sequences, crediting them with preparing him emotionally and physically before tackling the more dramatic scenes. He believed those early concert shoots allowed him to settle naturally into the role before the harder emotional material began. The production considered it a rare privilege to film extensively on location in Los Angeles, particularly at the actual Havenhurst estate, since shooting in the real rooms, including the kitchen and front room, provided authenticity that would have been difficult to replicate elsewhere. The property, purchased in 1971 by Michael's grandfather and family, looked markedly different originally before Michael remodeled it around 1982 to 1983 into the fairy tale-inspired English Tudor style still recognized today. Crew members described the surreal experience of realizing they were standing in Michael's actual bedroom and closet, occasionally joking about spookier corners of the estate they preferred not to explore. The Jackson estate proved generous in sharing details from the two eras depicted in the film, and the production discovered many original items still stored on the property, including some found in the garage after being damaged by a past water leak, which were cleaned and restored, providing unexpected authenticity. Because the estate had not been continuously inhabited, the production was able to restore the upstairs completely, replacing carpeting and redoing walls to reflect how the space looked during the era Michael lived there, a restoration the family reportedly appreciated as a way of honoring those memories. Cast and crew described the experience as deeply immersive, remarking that the authenticity of Havenhurst could not have been manufactured, and recalled filming scenes set in Catherine and Joseph's actual bedroom, sensing that the lingering energy of the space informed their performances. One crew member expressed disbelief at being present in the very house where the Billie Jean short film had been created, recalling excitement at seeing the counter Michael reportedly touched or the space where he slept and ate breakfast. During downtime, Jaafar showed a colleague around Michael's former studio, pointing out the original engineering board and mirrors, prompting a spontaneous, symbolic spin in the space where Michael himself may once have spun. Where logistics required recreating certain Havenhurst spaces on a soundstage, the production worked to make the sets nearly indistinguishable from the real locations, with crew members praising how convincingly authentic the reconstructions felt even when they weren't shot on location. Producers emphasized that every scene functioned as its own significant event within what they considered an ambitious event film, underscoring the emotional weight felt while filming inside the real house. Because the crew had only limited access to the real hallway and bedroom, they built an expanded version of Michael's actual bedroom on a soundstage to allow greater flexibility in camera coverage. Recreating the space accurately was complicated by the sheer volume and variety of objects, including vintage toys and memorabilia, that had originally filled Michael's real room. The The production secured genuine items from the Jackson estate to enhance the set's authenticity, including for a pivotal scene recreating a famous photograph of Michael holding all 8 Grammy Awards he won, for which the estate loaned Michael's actual Grammys, marking the first time the trophies had been used this way in a film production. Filmmakers noted this level of access made scenes dramatically easier and more accurate than attempting to recreate such details from scratch, crediting the estate's cooperation for allowing every detail, from props to lighting, to remain faithful to how Michael himself might have wanted it represented. Crew members described feeling disoriented after spending time in Michael's real bedroom for planning meetings, later feeling almost jolted back to reality upon stepping onto the soundstage, struck by how convincingly every detail, from set dressing to props to lighting, replicated the authentic environment, underscoring how important that accuracy was to King, Fuqua, and Jaafar in serving longtime fans. The conversation shifted to the making of the thriller sequence, with a special effects makeup artist recalling that as a 14-year-old aspiring artist, watching the original Thriller behind-the-scenes footage featuring makeup legend Rick Baker had proven deeply influential, shaping an entire generation of makeup artists who could still recall the moment they first saw it. Producers recognized that recreating the sequence could have been handled economically with a smaller team working longer hours, but instead chose to assemble 20 of the greatest living makeup artists, deliberately selecting those who had not worked on the original video so a new generation could finally take part. One of the artists recruited, a 3-time Academy Award winner named V. Neal, had been unable to work on the original video decades earlier due to prior professional commitments and had long regretted missing the opportunity. She was the first person contacted for the remake and immediately agreed, despite being largely retired, insisting she would not miss the chance a second time. She described feeling anxious about matching the original design so closely associated with her, ultimately choosing sponge application techniques over the original oatmeal-based method. Artists explained the layered zombie makeup technique, beginning with dark base tones before building up highlights to create dramatic, 3-dimensional depth, crediting collaborators like 2-time Oscar winner Dave Anderson, whose own father had originally created one of the zombie makeups in the 1983 video, with achieving similarly striking results for the new production. For Jaafar's transformation, the team had to track and replicate at least 4 distinct hairstyle changes Michael's real hair underwent throughout the original video, adjusting details continuously depending on the specific moment being filmed that night, often working through overnight shoots without rest to keep every take consistent. Crew members recalled that once the music began and dancing started, the entire crew instinctively joined in, swaying and mimicking the choreography. Putting on the recognizable red Thriller outfit brought home the surreal realization of recreating one of the most iconic music videos ever made, filmed on the very same street 42 years after the original, with the sound of the song blasting through speakers and zombie extras wandering the set, creating an overwhelming meta experience that felt magical to everyone present, prompting lingering disbelief that they had truly filmed it. Cast and crew praised Jaafar and the dancers for executing the sequence flawlessly, calling it one of the most memorable nights of the production. The conversation then turned to visual effects, referencing dramatized dialogue in which Michael is warned about undergoing further plastic surgery, illustrating that unlike flashy blockbuster effects, this film's visual effects needed to remain invisible, supporting a story that otherwise appeared entirely effects-free, despite ultimately including around 700 finished shots, and nearly 1,000 more that were started and abandoned during production. The effects team explained that as Michael's physical appearance evolved through implied cosmetic procedures in the story, his nose needed to visibly change shape over time, a shift the hair and makeup department, led by an artist praised as one of the best in the field, could only partially achieve using prosthetics on Jaafar's naturally healthy nose profile. Because his nose could never be reduced small enough through prosthetics alone, a digital component became necessary, dividing the transformation work between practical makeup designer Bill Corso and a visual effects team, though early digital tests pushed the resemblance too far and were scaled back once producers realized excessive alteration looked unnatural. Fuqua explained wanting Jaafar to remain visibly recognizable as himself, rather than being transformed so completely that audiences and press would fail to identify him during promotional appearances, even as Michael's nose grew progressively smaller on screen to reflect his real-life changes over time. The visual effects supervisor described establishing close collaboration between the makeup and digital teams from the outset to ensure consistency. Young Michael actor Giuliano had a forehead scar that needed digital removal in every scene, a correction handled efficiently in post-production by an in-house visual effects artist rather than through time-consuming daily prosthetic coverage, illustrating that nearly every shot of Michael, young or old, contained some form of digital enhancement however subtle, including touch-ups to real locations that had changed or deteriorated since Michael's era. Much of the film's visual effects work focused on recreating historically accurate concert environments, including Dodger Stadium, Wembley Stadium, and Madison Square Garden, requiring meticulous research into period-accurate stadium designs and crowd sizes as Michael's fame grew. Filmmakers filmed limited groups of extras performing varied movements, then digitally extended those crowds into the thousands, rendering some shots at extremely high resolution to avoid any visible pixelation, aiming for crowds so convincing that audiences would never suspect digital augmentation and would instead feel present at the actual concerts. The effects team described an enormous workload and a visual effects budget that ballooned due to constant revisions, comparing the project's scale to a superhero blockbuster given how iconic and larger-than-life Michael Jackson's persona was, while still requiring the effects work to remain undetectable to viewers, extending even to smaller details like animals and props needed to feel completely real. Before signing on, King and Fuqua met with most crew members individually, finding that nearly everyone involved shared genuine admiration and respect for Michael Jackson, alongside strong professional talent. One collaborator reflected on being transported back to childhood admiration for Michael, expressing disbelief that his younger self could have imagined being part of such a project, while noting that the shared passion for honoring Michael gradually turned the set into an extended family, with relatives of crew members, including King's own daughters and the sound department's family members, working together on the film. Crew members described an unusually collaborative, loving atmosphere from day one, driven entirely by genuine affection for the story and for Michael himself, often spotting fellow crew members practicing dance moves or the Thriller zombie walk between takes. Several collaborators expressed that they personally could not imagine life without Michael Jackson's music, describing it as something that improves daily life, and noted that this shared devotion was palpable on set every day. Discussions around Jaafar's position as the production's lead performer emphasized the responsibility that came with setting the tone for the rest of the cast and crew, with mentors expressing hope that he would carry forward his uncle's legacy as an entertainer. Colleagues described Jaafar's process as something like a spiritual journey aimed at reintroducing audiences to a beloved performer many feared had been lost to time, while acknowledging it might sound sentimental to say that Michael lives on through everyone who loved him. Cast members reiterated near-universal admiration for Michael Jackson, expressing hope that the collaborative spirit of the production, rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose, would translate into a strong, emotionally resonant film crafted under Fuqua's direction as master storyteller. Jaafar described the entire experience as a defining, transformative chapter of his life, one that reshaped his character and left him with lessons he intends to carry forward. Colleagues closed by reflecting that filmmaking is inherently collaborative, and that the closeness of this particular cast and crew, functioning almost like an extended family bound by shared love for Michael Jackson, ultimately became one of the production's greatest strengths. Working and eventually living at Havenhurst brought a profound shift, making it possible to feel Michael's spirit within the walls, to embody him there, and to relive childhood memories tied to the place. Coming back mattered because of the deep history rooted there, as growing up happened in the same house where Michael spent much of his own time after moving from Gary. Being surrounded by that same environment and energy felt essential, even through long stretches of solitude. When the quiet became too heavy, filling the house with Michael's music or the classical pieces he used to play restored a sense of joy and comfort. The recording studio, where Michael built the demos for the Thriller album, carries a weight of history that feels deeply inspiring. Real appreciation for the room only developed years later. Only after returning did the privilege arise to stay in that space and even dance inside the recording booth, marking the point when movement practice began. That same room became the starting point for learning Michael's choreography, with basic steps built through repetition, one move at a time, despite the limited space. Once the doors were shut, the soundproofing created total silence and a sense of isolation from the outside world, allowing full focus. Dimmed lights and loudspeakers set the stage for continuous dancing, and reading a particular quote before each session became a ritual, serving as a springboard into practice centered on constant research and study. The former dining room, now the largest open space in the house, was converted for dancing and fitted with mirrors, along with a life-sized cutout of Michael, serving as both a companion and a reminder of being watched while learning his movements. A natural echo in that room amplifies any music played there, adding to its appeal for practice. Dancing in that space often produces surreal moments, shaped by growing up learning and embodying Michael within the very house where he was raised and developed many of his signature moves, drawing on inspiration from other greats. Such moments bring pauses filled with gratitude for the chance to do this work in this particular place with no day taken for granted, and both the discipline and playfulness of the process embraced alongside the vulnerability it exposes. A distinct energy fills the house, with Michael's presence occasionally felt in unexpected moments, described as something indispensable to have held on to. Everything is framed as unfolding through divine timing, with deep gratitude for the path taken and a clear sense of purpose. Honoring Uncle Michael faithfully means staying true to his essence and vision and carrying his message forward through every endeavor well beyond this film and into everyday life. A live performance by Michael Jackson was never experienced firsthand, making the current viewing the closest possible connection to both father and family. The attendance of several of Michael's original band members at Jaafar's performance was remarkable, and the reactions of chills and a sensation of stepping into a time machine confirmed that something special was unfolding. Drummer Jonathan Moffat arrived in tears, expressing disbelief at what was being witnessed and comparing the moment to entering a time capsule. The occasion is framed as a chance to reflect on decades of careers while watching a family story being recreated, with recognition that those present had helped shape that story over the years. Coming to the event and observing everything unfold was described as deeply emotional, especially given uncertain expectations beforehand. Walking into the venue triggered a flood of memories, producing flashbacks and a lump in the throat. Choreographer Vince Patterson was seen wiping away tears, overwhelmed by the power of the music, while Marlon's experience of watching an on-stage performance echoing past appearances was called very moving. Recollections of the Victory Tour resurfaced, alongside expressions of pride in being an uncle to Jaafar and astonishment at how closely small hand gestures echoed Michael's signature movements. A cinematographer who filmed Michael's concerts described looking through the lens at Jaafar and recognizing identical looks, mannerisms, and stage presence, calling the resemblance otherworldly and attributing it to shared DNA. No one was considered better suited for the role. A conversation with Prince about the project reportedly reflected excitement over the family's deep involvement, and multiple people who had toured or worked with Michael reported that the feeling once given by watching Michael perform live was matched by watching Jaafar.